Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host Dan Maisey dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. Today, I'm honoured to welcome Steve Martin, a huge name and a trailblazer in sports and entertainment marketing with over 25 years of experience in the industry. Steve is the founding partner at MSQ Sport and Entertainment, a recently launched global agency poised to redefine the industry by leveraging creativity, technology and data to create deeper connections for brands, talent and rights holders. Steve's illustrious career includes founding and leading MSQ Sport and Entertainment, where under his tenure the agency won a record 7 Sports Industry Agency of the Year titles. He has been consistently recognised as a top influencer in the field and recently joined the UK Sponsorship Hall of Fame. There is a huge amount to get into the next 25 minutes, so let's get straight into it. Steve, welcome to Talent Talks. How are you today?
I'm great, Dan. Thank you. Welcome to MSQ Sport and Entertainment. You're one of our first few guests through the door, so I'm glad you found out where we were here in Covent Garden.
Yeah, it's a lovely area, lovely office and a lovely environment. And as I said before we started recording, we've even got some dancing going on in the background that we can look at as well.
Yeah, there's some sort of ballroom dancing, it looks like, across the road in the Royal Opera House today, which, we talk about people having hobbies and passions. That's definitely a passion over there because it's incredible the amount of people come in and out to do that. So, yeah, it's a great location. We're very lucky to be in the centre of London. I think Covent Garden is really thriving. Ironically, I started one of my main jobs at Adidas here in Covent Garden, just across the road. So it's very nice to be back here, but it's definitely thriving. The place is just, it's not just all tourists, actually. You expect it to be that, but there's a buzz and it's a great place for our staff to come into and our clients to come into, we hope, going forward, because it's so central as well.
Yeah, and nice and easy to get to as well, which is always a plus. So we always start with the same question, Steve, and that is, what are your experiences of hiring and being hired, and do you have any lessons learned?
I mean, it's a pretty open question, and we could talk a lot about that. I think there's two sides to that. There's obviously the hiring and being hired, and you could probably say there's different experiences around that. I think for me, obviously, originally it was being hired. So whenever you're first in the market, and certainly coming down to a place like London, it's pretty daunting sometimes where do you turn to? I mean, I was pretty ruthless that I wanted to be and work in sport from a very, very early age. It helped that when I'd done my business degree at Manchester, I ended up doing a year out in the PR department of Adidas as part of my degree. And then when I actually left there, it was easier to go and find a job, if you like, but it was scary and daunting because at that time there weren't as many agencies around as there are now, and there was only certain brands that you wanted to work for. I'm a great believer if you go in-house to work somewhere, you've got to really, really want to be part of that brand and get it and care about it. So that was one thing. But I think the hiring part of that process, to be hired, the fundamentals were you didn't have a LinkedIn profile, you couldn't project yourself through digital and social media. It was really about one-to-one in a room and actually good old-fashioned CV. So knowing and having that ability to articulate what you do and what you want to do and sell yourself, there's nowhere to hide. So I think that being hired process was, tell you what, it toughens you up and it focuses your mind and it makes you really think about how you are, project yourself and your skill set, because you could end up waffling around it, you get nowhere. I like to know from people, like, tell me why you would be great to be part of this business. And I was sort of hopefully lucky enough to be able to shape that in my head, be able to hopefully get that across the line. And that led me into working for Hill & Knowlton for a long time on the PR side, and then going back in-house to Adidas for many years. So that was a great process of being hired. And I think I always remember that the questions were really great, but you were also made to feel comfortable. Yeah. Because I think sometimes you can go into a room and there's somebody across the table, looks like they don't care, and you're one of a number. And I tell you what, it affects the interview and affects your well, it affects how you feel about that company too. Because at the end of the day, hiring and being hired is a two-way process. It's not one way. So if you don't feel comfortable with it, or somebody doesn't make you feel comfortable, well, then it's not going to start off on foot. And I was quite lucky from Hill and Knowlton days and through the Adidas. I was made to feel incredibly welcome. And, this was part of a process, but it was a conversation as opposed to like a deep interview, if you like, where you're in the spotlight. So that's that side. I think the hiring is it's a difficult process to find the right talent. And then I'm of a great believer that if somebody cares about, having put time aside to write to you, to apply, to send you a message, to pick up the phone, to send you an email, send you a thing on LinkedIn or social, whatever it may be, you should reply. And the last 2 weeks has been absolutely extraordinary here when we launched the agency in MSQ. And I do believe that the interest has been extraordinary. And I do want to reply to everybody individually. So the hiring of talent, which we'll hopefully go into today about building that team, it's still a two-way process, and it's not us talking at you, it's about the other way around as well. So I don't think we have all the answers, but I think we have a good idea of how to do it and a way of doing it which is deeply respectful. And I think that's one of the things that maybe doesn't come across most times.
Yeah, I think what you said there is echoed on a number of different occasions by a number of people that I've spoken to. I think coming back to the comfort side of things, it's fascinating to hear from you, because you're right. It is a two-way street. I think the power has moved, and the listener will have heard me say this before, but the power has shifted slightly from it being purely on the business and the candidate going, I need a job, to the candidate going, well, does this fit me as much as does it fit the business? And ultimately, if they do come together and converge in the right way, that is the best outcome. In terms of your experiences when you were interviewing, what types of things did interviewers do to make you feel comfortable? And what are the things that you're now bringing into what you're doing here at MSQ in terms of that comfort factor and making a candidate who is going to be nervous, they're going to be sat in that waiting room outside thinking, I've hopefully prepared for this interview. What are the types of things you do to make sure they are comfortable and so they can sell themselves in the best way?
I mean, it starts for me that anyone who comes in the door here, or a phone call or any interaction they have with the business at MSQ Sport and Entertainment going forward, and I've felt this forever, is that it starts with, I want them to have a good experience coming in, and when they leave the business, they think really well of that business and the individual interviewing them. Whether it's me or not, whether it's part of the team, it doesn't matter. And whether they get the job or not, it doesn't matter. So I still want them walking out the door being ambassadors for us and telling them that we're normal and we're accessible and we're, we have a dialogue and they can, we're approachable, all that stuff. At the end of the day, what we do for a living is not the most important thing, but I do want them to feel warm about the place and feel that, they might go off in 2 or 3 years' time and come back and we'll hire them again. You never know. So that it comes from that, and then everything works back from that. So I think in terms of how we go about that is just create a dialogue from the off. It's like having a conversation. If you go to a dinner party and somebody just bleats out the whole time, talks at you the whole time, what a horrible experience that is. You want to walk out. So if you do that analogy and say, well, actually, why don't you create a conversation and make somebody feel comfortable within seconds? Because it is a daunting process. I think, particularly when you're younger and, from every walk of life, it's a big deal. And particularly, I think there's more emotion around sort of wanting to be involved in sport or entertainment, because it feels like, I really, really want to be in that. So you can sense that. But I think if people are at ease, then they're their true self. And making people at ease is, my dad was unbelievable at it. I have to say that he sort of was probably the one that taught me. He asked more questions, to be honest with you, and find out who he's talking to and what their background, how they're feeling, how are you? It was always a question, how you doing? Tell me about it, So I would always do that at the start of any conversation with anyone we're interviewing. Say, just talk to me. What are you up to? Before you get into the nitty gritty of the job and that specific thing, because you can tell an awful lot with people's character, how they handle that. But they will handle it a hell of a lot better if they're at ease. And I think to make people at ease, you have to ask them questions that make them feel they can open up to you. And that's not often the case, particularly in the marketing world.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the point you made earlier in it being an inherently emotional journey. And I think there are certain people and certain agencies and certain people in sports specifically that forget that it is an inherently emotional journey. And again, you mentioned it, so I'm preaching to the converted in the sense that it's not the hardest thing in the world. We're not brain surgeons. We're not rocket scientists. We work in sport, and it's a great place to be and a great place to work. And there's a lot of people who want to work in it. But ultimately, it's a relationship business. And by creating an emotionally safe environment, you create something that is going to foster a better conversation and better answers from a candidate perspective, or just a better relationship. I think we've got a bit of egoism around the sports industry. People thinking that if you don't work in it, you won't be able to learn from it. And if you haven't worked in it, why are you even applying if you need 10 years of specific sports experience? And fundamentally, unless it's a very nuanced and niche role, you don't. And actually, you want that diversity and those different thought processes to challenge yourself, really.
Of course you do. I mean, if you hired everybody who's the same, it would be a pretty boring business. But I think there's also, I come from the school of thought that I feel really privileged to work in the sport and entertainment industry. I don't take that lightly. I wake up every day and look, there's going to be good days and bad days at work. Of course there are. But I would say over the last 30 years, whatever, like I've bounced in. And I think that's helping hopefully create an environment that people can thrive in and feel really comfortable in, to show them, again, if they're really comfortable, then they'll be the best they can be. If they're not, they're on edge. And then that makes everybody tighten up. And particularly in a business where it's just our business here is very much a creative business as well. I need people to come here and not be, tight. I want them to come in and be freewheeling and, have their minds open and really thinking about stuff and have that flair in the business, which is so crucial to us. So you have to create that environment. But I want then, the people we hire to be so diverse in terms of their makeup and thinking. And I think what I did at MSQ Sport and Entertainment over those 20 years, the diversity of that team over time was extraordinary. And the different thinking was extraordinary, and I think that's deeply reflective in what we were creating there in terms of the work and the clients we won and the business. And I think coming here to MSQ, that's probably going to be tenfold because of what we want to run at and the team we're curating, because we're a startup. Yeah. I would say we're a startup on steroids, really, but we are a startup, and actually we're curating that team as we speak, and that team will be highly, highly diverse and across multiple countries as well. So I think it's not just this sort of one-eyed view in London and the UK. It's absolutely not. And I think just that culture that you see across multiple markets helps provide an energy, again, to push us all on too. So it's not an easy process at all. I'm maybe simplifying it too much, but I think the opportunity is to really, it's open to anyone. And I think that's where I think sometimes there's a snobbishness around the sports industry. You can't get into it because it's so difficult unless you know it. I mean, that's just nonsense. And it's also not about, playing sport. A number of times I've had people come in for interviews and go, "Oh, I'm an Arsenal fan." And I'm like, I really don't care about that. I mean, there's plenty of Arsenal fans. Do you understand the business of sport? And do you understand what we're trying to do and the rationale why we even exist as a business? So this is what I'm saying, it goes two ways. The candidate needs to have done their homework. So they're not just, I want to be in sport. And vice versa. I need to make sure, we're creating an environment that people can really understand our business too, so they're not sort of naive to it all.
I'll come back to the candidate work element in a second, but that's the biggest lesson coming through from the podcast so far is fundamentally that the candidate needs to understand the why they want to go into the business of sport, not just going into an interview and say, "I love sport, I want to work in sport." I think if you listen to any back episodes, there are a lot of people that have come on and said, "If you say you like sport, that's great, but I don't care. We don't spend all day, every day talking about sport." If you come here and say, I love the business of sport and I love whether it's the commercial or the creative side of it, and I want to make an impact here, here, or here, that's a very different sell. And then coming back to the candidate actually selling themselves, I find that there are now ways of applying for a job that make things far too easy. And if you get candidates applying without really understanding where they want to apply for and what they want to do, and I think that really comes back to what I mentioned earlier around the power dynamic between businesses and candidates. There still needs to be a real emphasis on the candidate understanding that they need to do the research. They need to do the work. And it's very, very obvious when you're interviewing someone if they haven't done any research and if they haven't done any work, because as soon as you ask any question around anything to do with, for example, MSQ Sport and Entertainment, they'll be stuck. And you can tell that in the answer pretty much every single time.
You can, and I would say, one of the best things you can do is do your homework. And anything, if you're going into an interview or you're sending a note or anything that you're trying to interact with that organization, whether it's us or not, if you haven't spent the time understanding the business, why they exist in the first place, what the vision is, what they're trying to, not hard to find a lot of that. It's lazy if you don't. But then when the conversation is, when you do get to a face-to-face situation, then it's actually a really valuable conversation. And that cuts out all the nonsense about, I want to work in sport just because I like sport and all that. So, but I think we're seeing less and less of that as the whole industry is grown. Our competitive set, when we first started out, which is probably the reason me going to agency side from the likes of an Adidas in-house, anyway, was because I think the competitive set was only 4 or 5 agencies, probably now 15 and 20. So it opens up more opportunities, but then I think it means the hiring and bringing talent in and looking after that talent and nurturing that talent and making sure that talent's there for the long haul with you. You've got to make sure that you're doing your homework up front. And so that's why I come back to saying this is a two-way process. And if the candidates are coming in and they've shown a real understanding of your business and can demonstrate that, that gets you into the next stage immediately. And it's amazing how many people don't do that. And then the second thing is applying that knowledge and being able to articulate what they can do. Because it's amazing people that, that I've met over the years couldn't tell you what their sort of, super skill is and why they're good to be in the business. And when you ask that question, some people freeze, and I don't think that's a hard question. But if you haven't thought about it, well, then it can be quite a quick conversation. And you don't want it to be like that, because it goes back to saying, I want people to feel comfortable and be able to articulate that. But if you haven't thought about it on the way in, it makes it difficult.
Really drilling down into the value that you can add to a business, and you should know, or at least do the work, or at least have thought of, even if you've only been work for a year, you will have a value to a business. It's just about working out what that narrative is behind what you can do and really articulate what you can do.
And don't be shy about doing that. I think sometimes people are, and I get this as well, by the way, maybe a bit more humble around things. And like at the end of the day, you might have a 15, 20-minute conversation around an interview. So you can't be too humble. What you can't be is arrogant, I think, because that will, spit out candidates quite quickly. But if you can be confident, I think there's a really fine line between those two. I think the confidence is really great to be around. And if somebody has, exudes that confidence, then you want to be around that. People want to be around that. But don't be shy about articulating yourself, I don't think you should sit in the fence. I don't think you should blurt out everything and, be come across as arrogant. But if you're good at what you do and there are certain areas where you need to improve on, well, just be honest and humble about it, because that is a terrific value to have. Yeah. And it's really sometimes overlooked, I think. And I think really that humble approach but confidence is really strong. It's nice to be around.
And you mentioned earlier around the value side of this comes into this as well, but the culture that you're building here at MSQ Sport and Entertainment. How are you approaching hiring when you are growing in terms of your growth plans as an agency, and how does that impact on speed of hire as much as anything else?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. It's taking me back sort of what we were doing 20 years ago of building a team from scratch as well. And it has to be curated. I think we're not just sort of, here we go, like just get anybody in. And I mean, that's not what we're doing. What we're trying to do is build the best team we can possibly build. Because as far as I'm concerned, it can be called anything. And particularly in the agency, I've been lucky to have names above the door that have resonated. MSQ, people don't know as much, but actually I think we're going to hopefully add to that. And that's actually a bit of a sleeping giant here, which is one of the big appeals for us to come here in the first place, as well as the whole model, which we'll maybe talk about from a cultural point of view. But really, from an agency perspective, and what we're trying to do is we can have any name above the door. The only thing that really matters are the people we bring in and the team we build. It's all we've got. It is actually all we've got. So unless we have the best possible team, we'll be average. I don't really want us to be average. I want us to, have a really great rhythm to the business, have a really good sort of momentum to the business that started well, albeit we're like 2 weeks old. But that's fine. But I think bringing in every single hire will be absolutely crucial at this stage, because you're setting your stall out. So, and it's about experience, but it's also about energy. So if you bring that experience that hopefully we're bringing to the party, apply that to, different levels of experience, different levels of expertise, but also in energy. And I want everybody that we bring in to have an understanding of the very clear vision, what we're trying to do. Well, then that will sort of narrow it down again. But we're curating a team around skill set, because we don't want everybody to be the same. We're curating around mindset as well, because that's deeply important. Understanding different audiences, what they want, what they do, what they share. That's massively important for the clients that we will be working for. So we can't sit around the table and we're all the same, giving the same advice about the same things. That would be absolutely ridiculous. And the best teams are made up with the most diverse thinking and diverse skill sets, and we will run at that very, very hard.
And how does the cultural impact of being part of a wider group impact that potentially positively and negatively in comparison to not having a wider group there so you can sit everything out by yourself? There's no wider directive there you have to work into. How does that have an impact?
Hard to know, but I mean, when we left and resigned from MSQ Saatchi, we thought, actually, we want to go and create our own thing, because if we don't do it now, we'll never do it. And it was an itch we wanted to scratch, if you know what I mean. And both Jamie and I were thinking, like, at one stage it was going to be just the two of us sitting there in an office, staring at each other, being pretty scared. And we soon came to the conclusion, when we had a few things sort of put across us, and the reason we loved here was because you've got the infrastructure around you, you've got the things you maybe don't need to think about as much from a finance and IT and all that infrastructure. I mean, you definitely need to think about finance behind you, but we've got all of that here. But so it allows us to focus on the business. But also, I've loved the dynamic here within MSQ that across the 10 other agencies, for example, in the group, key leaders and the team just under that all have shares within the MSQ organisation. So as a result, within those 10 agencies, we are the shiny new toy in terms of the sport and entertainment agency that they didn't have. But actually what it does create is natural collaboration, because everybody's trying to build up the MSQ value, which means it doesn't matter where that comes from. And in previous agencies, the elbows are out and the collaboration feels like forced fun, which is horrendous. You know what forced fun is like. It's the worst thing in the world. So it feels like there's a natural collaboration amongst the team and across all the agencies. That was the rationale for coming here. And then we can pick on the different skill sets in terms of talent within the group, because there's incredible tech capability, incredible data insight capability, great creative flair in different businesses, superb content production capabilities, really good PR, great advertising. So you've got that within the group. And that means we can plug into that immediately. But then we'll be bolstering our specific and dedicated sport and entertainment team, as we discussed and heavily curated.
It's a really positive model, because I've been involved in environments where new agencies have been brought in and it's been very difficult to integrate them, because you still have separate targets. Everything is very different and potentially conflicting clients and how does that work? And it can be really quite challenging to get that integration right. Look, Steve, we could sit here for a whole lot longer, but I am very conscious of your time. We've got to get to the final 3 questions that we ask everybody. So let's get into the first one. What is your most frustrating thing about recruitment?
I think the lack of preparation and understanding of what we do for a living and what our business stands for. It's incredible how over the years there's been, this sort of blanket email approach, if you like, to just sending us stuff all the time. And I think, there's a lot of people who want to work in this industry, which is brilliant, because the more people who want to work in it, we're doing something right. I think that, from the sport and entertainment industry to make it an attractive career. But I think the bit that I get frustrated about is just these random sort of approaches, if you like. And you just know it's actually more hassle than it's worth. Because you still think, I still want to reply, but it's more hassle and it's not thought through, and it's just this blanket approach. It's like getting a mailer. And I just think some of those things, that's the bit that I'd be more frustrated with. But I think it is changing. There's a bit of hope that people actually now understand that they need to, have a more of an understanding what that business is about and the rationale and what we do day to day for a living. Just because it says sport and entertainment above the door can mean many different things, but you need to look at what our skill set is and what we're looking at, and we're pretty accessible. So, pick up the phone and say, what are you looking for? What do you need? What are your challenges? What do your clients want? And then it can be a much more valuable conversation, more focused.
You don't have to name them, but you are more than welcome to. Who has been your best hire and why?
Wow, what a question. I'm obviously going to say Jamie Van Morgan, who's been my partner in crime here for the last 20 odd years. And we're doing this together as the founding partners of MSQ Sport and Entertainment. So, Jamie was the first phone call I really made when I moved to M&C Saatchi, really sitting in the corner, panicking about it again. And he joined a few months later, which was great. But, every hire we've brought in, I've been really, really lucky, Dan, to be surrounded by so many good people over the last 25, 30 years. I really have. And I think, I remember Maurice Saatchi said to me at the time, make sure you just hire people better than you, which is really what I've done. And but I've given that autonomy and that belief to them and the structure that they can flourish, I hope. We've had amazing people that we've had in the last 20 years in agency. A team that ran North America were extraordinary. A team down in Australia were amazing. Team in South Africa, team in Amsterdam. All the team Berlin as well, and the team in London. So I've been so lucky. But I think the reason why they flourished was we created an environment for them to flourish and backed them to flourish. And I think all those hires, I could name 30 to 40 people as opposed to one.
Great. We haven't got time then to name them all, but
You'll be glad.
great. And then final one from me, Steve. What is the one thing that you would change about the recruitment world?
I would make it a little bit more dynamic. I would make it a little bit more flexible as well. I think it's like anything, you get the best results if it's highly, highly focused. I'd rather not be bombarded by 20 recruiters. I'd rather, have real partnerships with 2 or 3. So certainly what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create momentum. To create momentum, we need people and clients to come on board with us, right? So we would rather have anyone who's helping in recruitment come with us it sounds very corny, this journey. That's the worst bloody word in the world. But you know what I mean? We want them to have an understanding and be dynamic enough to move with us as we progress. But understand that, it's a pretty restless business. When we started in, previous agency, we were very much just sport. And then we evolved into entertainment. Then we evolved into more of a lifestyle business. Then digital and social media came into play, and the experiential had its, sort of rise within that mix. Then you've had sort of, big brand plays coming out and, still above the line. So it was just constantly evolving, and we were pretty restless in that. So you need a business from a recruitment side to then say, well, how are you going to drive those different skill sets? And be open-minded. I also I also like advice. Like, I want people to advise us. I don't want people just sending us stuff. Well, let's work together. Here's the gaps. But advise me what's in the market.
It's a partnership approach.
It has to be. It has to be. I don't want to be saying to you, Dan, right, tell us about what you're hearing. Tell us about what you're seeing. Not big sweeping generalizations, but, how do we move this business forward as part of our industry? As the industry gets bigger, talent are more in demand. So I'm going to be relying on people who are out there, that's what they do for a living, to tell me what's happening. So I think that sort of consultancy view from they're called recruitment consultants. And I think the consultancy viewpoint could be dramatized a bit more, or just thought through a bit more, perhaps.
I couldn't agree more, but we don't have time to go into all of that, unfortunately. But look, Steve, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's been fantastic. I know our listener will be able to take a huge amount from this conversation. So, look, Steve, thanks again for coming on Talent Talks.
Pleasure, Dan. Good to see you. Thank you.